A lot of starting the DeShaun Foster era off correctly involves leaning on the seniors and the veteran leadership.
You are Locked On UCLA, your daily podcast on the UCLA Bruins. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome, everybody, to this edition of the Locked On UCLA podcast. I'm your host, Zach Anderson-Yoxsimer. Thanks for making this show your first listen each and every day. It's free wherever you get your podcast, and it's available on YouTube. Like, comment, subscribe. Thanks for your support. This episode is brought to you by Game Time. And what you got to do is download the app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Where we get started today in this episode is the importance for DeShaun Foster's seniors, his veteran leaders, to step up and make an impact this year, right? It is the importance of this team to step up and see who can dominate and make their names known. So UCLA, if you look at the Senior Bowl list that was released, right, taking a comparison and how important it is for DeShaun Foster's bunch, UCLA this year has 10 Bruins named to the Senior Bowl watch list for 2025. That's February 1st. It's going to be held in Mobile, Alabama. The athletes include Josh Carlin, you've got Logan Loya, Kane Madrano, Femi Oladejo, Bryce Pierre, Gary Smith, Sturdivant, Toia, Vaughn, Keanu Williams. So you've got an event that's going to have many players possibly, and you got a UCLA team that's, if you look at the rest of the Big Ten, the Bruins this year have quite a few Big Ten, or have more possible Senior Bowl watch list members than most of the Big Ten, right? They're in good middle of the pack, right next to USC and Wisconsin and Minnesota. They're, close to Michigan. Ohio State, I believe, leads the pack with 18. Penn State, Ohio State, Oregon. The teams that all have the most amount of Senior Bowl watch list guys are teams to pick to finish in the top half of the conference. Well, what does that mean? Well, you're looking at a team that is not like the majority of the teams across college football. UCLA, for the most part, had a pretty solid retainer rate for keeping their players. An offense that's got some senior veteran leadership. And we didn't even talk about the importance of their senior quarterback in Ethan Garbers, who's been around quite some time, been in the UCLA program, it seems like forever, and now gets his opportunity to start, where UCLA's got those senior veterans on the offensive line. They've got that senior tight end. They've got those super seniors in the secondary that came to shore up what was the lost members of the secondary from last year. A lot of veteran leadership for this team for DeShaun Foster. I've already talked about the importance of Ethan Garbers, the signal caller, getting the signal from Eric Bieniemy. Those are two important pieces to this UCLA puzzle. But when you've got a J. Michael Sturdivant, a Loya, and they're all the senior receivers, they are experienced. They've got talent in that room, which makes them so lethal and dangerous. You've got an offensive line that if they can withstand any pressure from the Big Ten defenses up front, hang in there in the trenches, protect to keep the likes of Garbers upright, make some holes for some running backs, then UCLA is going to score points. And despite all that is lost from last year's team, you had Latu getting drafted, finishing up his career, the Murphy twins finishing up their collegiate careers and going to the NFL. UCLA replaced those guys with some plug-and plays, right? You got Sharif Say coming along. You've got some veterans in the secondary between the Wallaces, between Brian Addison, who's played so many years of college football. So what UCLA is getting, you hope, yes, productive players, but guys who have played a lot of games. And if you're looking at different programs, sometimes they're going after the super sophomore after their freshman year or the junior, trying to make his name known in a new space. UCLA, though, is led by a senior quarterback. They've got not a lot of depth defensively as they try to figure out who the new faces, the new names are under new defensive coordinator Kaika Malloy, and they'll step up and show out during this next season who the next stars are. And yes, we've got some expected players like the Oladejos coming in, the Madranos on the linebacking role. You've got Toia who stayed. But then you've got the likes of veteran presence like a Devin Kirkwood, Jalen Davies, who's been around as a redshirt player, initially at Oregon, coming to UCLA for a few years and being a stalwart in the secondary. And then with all the super seniors in the defensive secondary. You've got a lot of opportunity for UCLA surprise because they've got players who have played the game before. Now, you can argue about talent. You can argue about how much they played elsewhere, but these are guys hungry to play under a new enthusiastic coaching staff that is going to promote, hey, let's get energetic, let's get hyped, let's play full of life, full of love, discipline, respect, and enthusiasm are DeShaun Foster's pillars. And sometimes what you need to start off your tenure as a head coach, although when it comes to rebuilding programs, opportunities to build a program too, not just rebuild it, but build it into your own, you need a few years. That isn't always the case nowadays in college football. You sometimes get only a couple to a few years to really establish things because you can turn around things or lose a lot via the portal. And with coordinators coming and coordinators going, DeShaun Foster wants to set the tone. And how you can set the tone is reaching your senior players, reaching your third to fourth year junior players who can come in, establish a presence in the locker room, completely remove themselves from what was the weird, bitter feelings, bitter taste in their mouths at the end of the Chip Kelly era, where it's funny, right? You normally don't hire within what would be a fired head coach, but they didn't fire him. And then you've got DeShaun Foster, who already had some talented coaches from the previous regime. You keep in the defensive coordinator, you hire a very talented, very well-known offensive coordinator, and you've got some established pieces, and you hope you hit some home runs on some seniors and super seniors. Even if you don't, that's still a lot of leadership in that locker room, especially one would hope that after it's all this day, pre-COVID, during COVID, after COVID, which have all been different days and eras of college football, it's changed so drastically in the last 4 to 5 years. And the guys finishing up their career this year, a lot of them, most of them, some of them have seen what it was when college football was not as dominated initially by the portal as much as it is. You know, it's shopping season come the end of the season. It's shopping season in the spring. Commits, decommits, coaches being fired so late, coaches retiring as it was this late in the year. Earlier this year, coaches jumping ship to go be coordinators elsewhere like it was for Chip Kelly because their coach got hired at Boston College. And, you know, as crazy as it is, the key to this year's team is the veteran leadership. Yes, there's specific keys within games like protection, the defense. Can they pick things up special teams-wise, which we'll talk about in the next segment. UCLA has a lot of older players, and the teams predicted in the Big Ten to do well. Ohio State, Oregon, they have a lot. They already just lost their quarterback in Bo Nix, who's going to be, the starter for the Broncos. And you bring in a guy who's been to 3 places, but he started everywhere he's gone, in Dylan Gabriel. You've got, some senior leadership, dare I say, at USC, despite them trying to figure out a defense. Penn State is expected to have some senior leadership, guys who've been in the locker room. Those are teams expected to be amongst the top in the Big Ten. I'm not saying UCLA is going to compete, but when they're predicted to finish 18th, 17th, they've got a lot of veterans in that locker room who are not that bad of football players. Now, can they handle and withstand the hostile road atmospheres? Although they're not going to too many this year. You got LSU, Penn State, and then Nebraska, I would say, would be your most hostile. Yes, they've been to Washington before, and Washington's with the new coach, new regime. Can't expect it to be like it was last year out in Montlake. So UCLA has the senior leadership I think it needs to turn into a team that can understand the X's and O's, help teach the youngins. Garbers has already been out there. Eric Bieniemy saying during the preseason part of practices and talking with the training camp reporters, hey, he's out there leading the installs. The guys who have been around college football, they're going to take a little bit less time to digest the information, one would hope, brought in by Bieniemy offensively, brought in by Kaika Malloy, trying to do similar things. I believe he's been quoted as saying, is Danton Lynn, not to completely overhaul a system so late in a coaching change, so late in a coordinator change with newer players, just trying to replenish what was lost in the pass rush. That's where it helps having so many veterans on this year's team, that I think where UCLA could surprise, make the bowl, maybe get a win or two more, is because they've got so much leadership on this team. Now, it's going to be tough when you go through the dog days of LSU, Oregon, Penn State, 3 in a row, and then you forget there's a couple more games in there that are equally as tough and daunting, but it's showing up every day despite the doubters and proving them wrong. And that's where it can help with some senior leaders. Where you do need help, though, is the kicking game. And UCLA, according to DeShaun Foster, has not ironed that out. We'll talk about that next on Locked On UCLA. All right, let's talk about Game Time, because Game Time now has a new feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets for your favorite live events even easier. Game Time Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. All you got to do is look at the Game Times tickets, because it's curation that makes it easier to find more on your favorite events to go to: sports, concerts, comedy, whatever it may be. And you can look with the panoramic view from your seating in the app before you buy your ticket. Take the guesswork out of buying concert tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONCollege, LOCKEDONCOLLEGE, LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. And you've also heard us talk about FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Well, we have something a little different for you now. Through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. With a YouTube TV-based plan, you'll be able to watch every regular season Sunday afternoon out-of-market game. All you need is a Google account and a current form of payments, and you can cancel anytime. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to download America's #1 sportsbook. Cruising on in the second segment of Locked On UCLA, we're talking special teams, our favorite part of the team that was somewhat neglected during the Chip Kelly era, going after guys in the portal, flip-flopping everything in between. UCLA is in need of a new finding and solidifying their starting punter, finding and solidifying their starting kicker. Well, it's down to 2 guys, according to DeShaun Foster. This is what he had to say about his 2 battles between a total of 4 players, 2 for each position for his special teams unit, which are arguably 2 units that will make differences in these close games that you're going to play during Big Ten games, non-conference games, whether it's Fresno State, Hawaii, or LSU. Maybe it's to steal a game on the road somewhere. It is the punter battle between Chase Berry and Brody Richter, and then the kicking competition, Mateen Begani and Blake Glessner. Now, let's talk punting, because it'll be a brief moment there. Punting, that's important for field position. You're going to deal with weird weather conditions. You're going to see yourself in Montlake. You're going to go to Rutgers in early fall, maybe a month into fall. You've got some funny atmospheres, like playing in Nebraska in November. I'm not sure UCLA has almost ever played in Nebraska in November. Of course, that's maybe not the case, but you're not going to get as many cold weather. You're not going to have as many cold weather experiences as UCLA might have had. Now, yes, it gets cold in Washington State and in Washington, but all these late season road games UCLA is going to take to just the closest games like Iowa or Nebraska in the future, it's going to require a good solidified punter. So it's between Berry and Richter, and we'll see who wins that, right? UCLA, they switched up the special teams coordinator, new offensive coordinator, and new DC. So when you have 3 new coordinators in your team, that's going to require a lot of focus by your team to listen to new voices with a lot of players that came back, as I talked about in the previous segment, the importance of the senior leadership. Then for UCLA to win those small battles like the kicking game, it's important and imperative that they can pin teams deep to maybe give the defense some space and not give up any yards or win the field position battle, whatever it may be. That's huge. Now let's talk about the kicking game, because that is arguably the most important thing. Glessner, a transfer kicker from Montana State, I remember seeing him in action when he was a Bobcat, was largely, for the first portion of the season, a kickoff specialist, the bigger leg, and would boot it deep. Now, the funny thing is, for both Glessner and Begani, these are 2 guys that got opportunities later in their years with both Cal for Begani and for UCLA's Glessner, because the previous winner of the kicking competition, the presumed starter, struggled so badly, or what have you, that these guys got opportunities. Now, I won't say exactly that Glessner seized the job, because UCLA would have not gone after Begani to begin with. My question is, Begani performed so well during the season last year and stopped the the wounds that Cal had suffered early in the year against Auburn when their starting kicker, I think, missed 3 or 4 field goals with Lockhurst. It was a struggle for their starting kicker. So they bring in Bagani, who didn't exactly start off his career as a kicker. In high school, hit a couple of 50-yarders, broke his high school record with a 53-yarder, has the leg, and was between the two kickers that are battling for the open spot, Bagani and Glessner. He was the guy that has more accuracy. Last year, Bagani, in 9 attempts, went 8 for 9, including 4 makes against UCLA. His 2 longs of the year were both 43-yard field goals. And earlier in the year, he was a kickoff specialist, was Bagani. Then I think got taken off, was 29 for 29 when it came to PATs, and made the majority of his field goals. Now we look at Blake Glessner, right? This is a kid who transferred over from Montana State. UCLA was trying to replace Nicholas Barmere, who grad transferred to Mississippi State. He was going both ways for UCLA. You have the redshirt senior from Woodinville, Washington, played for the Bobcats, so he played a lot of games. Last year, Glessner, overall 2 of 6, including 1 blocked kick when it came to the kicking game. 1 of 3 at Arizona, 1 of 2 at USC, and 0 for 1 against Cal. 2 of those 3 games, UCLA lost. In the 1 game against USC, they could have made that game an even bigger margin of victory. When USC at that moment, I think when he missed the kick, was still in the game, theoretically, before the Bruins pounded them down and took a big-time dub and sent USC home packing while the Bruins came back with the blue victory bell. Okay? Now, Glessner does have the ability. I think the loser in this one will turn into a kickoff specialist. Glessner did go 13 for 13 on PATs, which apparently were not any gimmies for UCLA in the last couple of years. So I wonder why it's so close between these two guys, considering Bagani performed so well in a Golden Bear uniform. But whatever it may be, practice tells a lot to these coaches. And if Glessner's winning the battle, I think in the spring game, he was technically the number 1. And now coming into fall camp, I wonder, is he doing so well that he's going to win this job? Or can Bagani pull it out? Because he took over that Cal job. And there are times last year where UCLA clearly in field goal position, what would be a chip in, they couldn't even make it half the time, a quarter of the time. Maybe that's not mathematically correct, but the way it felt at the time, UCLA, they were hesitant to kick field goals. Like early in the game against Utah, they go for it 4th and long in Utah territory. If you have some semblance of a decent kicking game, maybe you take that kick already down a touchdown with a semi-rattled quarterback at that time in Salt Lake City in early September. Or if you're UCLA later in the season against Arizona State, when you just need points, get your team on the board with your 3rd-string quarterback, they didn't want to take the points any of those times against the Sun Devils. Sun Devils stopped UCLA short on 4th and short, and you see how that piles up. When you have to go for it and you can't get those 3 points, that will add up over the course of the season. It adds up in the course of a game. And when UCLA couldn't make in a field goal against Cal, and their kicker's going 4 for 4, and he wasn't even the presumed starter at the beginning of the year, that tells you the difference in that game where UCLA got blown out at home to end the season in the Rose Bowl in the regular season when they could have beaten Cal and had a much better season, gone for a bigger win total. No, that is not what happened. And we could have had much better season in our hands, right? Okay. The kicking game's important. It's between Bagani, between Glessner, between last year's numbers. The numbers heavily favor Bagani. Heavily. But then it comes to off-season training, workout regimen, everything in between, performance, practice work ethic, practice attitude. And it might be Glessner who can steal it to start the season. But if it's not over from the beginning of the year, it might carry itself, unfortunately, throughout the season, which you hope it does not. Okay? So numbers favor Bagani, but I think Glessner is holding his own if DeShaun Foster is not right now declaring a starter in either his kicking game or his punting game. So that's important to look. Speaking of important to look, UCLA officially announced the likes of Dominick Harris coming to UCLA. They've officially signed him. I saw pictures of practice they posted, and he's in uniform. Looks great. Let's talk about what his impact is and what Mick Cronin had to say about his incoming, I believe it's technically a redshirt senior, who's got 2 years left of eligibility. Here on Locked On UCLA. Well, it's still barbecue season during this summertime. As it comes to a close, you can stack up on the rest of your grilling favorites and earn cash back as you purchase things using Ibotta. You want to choose between burgers or hot dogs, you can get both. Because it's a free app, Ibotta is. You can earn cash back every time you shop on hundreds of items, groceries, beauty supplies, even toys, to make sure you're beating inflation no matter what you're purchasing. You can save on over 2,400 brands and shop at over 1,000 retailers, including Lowe's, Macy's, Sephora, Best Buy, and more. Right now, Ibotta is offering $5 to our listeners just to try Ibotta using the code LOCKEDONCollege when you register. Go to the App Store, Google Play Store, download the free Ibotta app, and use the code LOCKEDONCollege to earn cash back. That's IBOTTA, Ibotta, in the App Store, Google Play Store with the code LOCKEDONCollege. Start saving. All right, cruising on, final segment here in Locked On UCLA. It's finally officially official. Dominick Harris, which was the worst kept secret, waiting to finish up his classes, get everything going in LMU. He's finally a Bruin. And let me tell you, I remember I was broadcasting the game the other day, and there was coaches literally on the day of the opener prior to the start of the fall season worrying about transfers who couldn't get their summer grades in, right? Because maybe teachers, professors took their sweet dang time from a previous school. Not saying this is Dominick Harris's case. This is not necessarily. But it's not always a gimme. And sometimes when it comes to paperwork, transfers, let alone international paperwork, it is an absolute grind. And there was times when it seemed like some players might not even play if they're trying to get those last second games in. Luckily for the basketball season and for UCLA for that matter, they start so late in the year. They get so many games in football-wise, fall sports season-wise. It can help ease their travel and their load when it comes to Big Ten season for any of their fall sports like the soccers, the volleyballs, or for, in this case, men's basketball, which starts in November in the heat of the UCLA grind of the opening quarter. Now, Dominick Harris, the former Gonzaga Bulldog turned LMU Lion, was one of their leading scorers, 14 points per game, 45% from three. That was the third best mark in the country when it came to three-point shooting. The threat by him, brought in by Mick Cronin, just significantly extends the amount of options UCLA can have and use when it comes to scoring the basketball. They've got varying options from the previous year's team with even more ability, more options with what Cronin found in the portal, in addition to the freshmen he brought in who are going to be feisty and compete for those starting spots, making some players angry, some players better, and the whole team an absolute fun unit to watch, and arguably as good as the team that won the Pac-12 2 seasons ago. I was kind of comparing and contrasting where Dominick Harris could be. He could look like a Dave Singleton with a three-point repertoire. Mick Cronin said, quotes about Dominick Harris, "We're thrilled to have Dominick Harris join our program," as he said this in the UCLA press release about his signing. He's a talented and experienced player, grew up in Southern California, wants to be at UCLA. Derek really thrived on offense last year, particularly as a deep threat. Something UCLA, this is my quote now, something UCLA is one of the worst at in the country. Now, clearly, he adds an element to our offense with his ability to make threes at a high rate. Back to Cronin's quote, he took some major strides as a player last year, led the WCC in three-point shooting percentage, but we also believe he can make a major impact on the defensive end and really help our team in a variety of ways. Where Mick Cronin, as much as he's selling out for the offense, he still needs players to play defense. And last year he said, I don't have guys, so I can't bench guys who can't play defense or are not good enough. He would say that multiple times without saying specifically who it was. This year, he's got the options. And if it's somebody who can't play 25 minutes a game, Harris has been known to have a couple of issues. Last year was plagued by an injury, missed a whole season due to injury issues in his second year at Gonzaga. This is a guy with still 2 years of eligibility, many scoring options who can come through and dominate in whatever role I hope UCLA throws at him. Whether it's line up, run around the screen, bury some threes, get us on a scoring run, that's huge. Now, if he's a lockdown defender, he doesn't need to be Kobe Johnson, doesn't need to be the Summit League Defensive Player of the Year and William Kyle, or the 1-4 ability guarding wise for Eric Daly Jr., or what Dylan Andrews has turned himself to be, the scrappiness of Stefanovic. UCLA, if they can utilize another guard defender, then Dominick Harris will earn himself a lot of minutes in a log jam in a backcourt that is arguably the deepest in the country and most talented top to bottom for the perimeter this year, right? So you're going to have to play defense. Now, Harris will see time. He will absolutely see time if he's healthy, if he's shooting well. He will be one of those first few options off the bench if he does not start. I'm not entirely sure if he's going to earn himself a starting position. It's mid to very late August. He just joined the team that's had summer workouts, and while they're not exactly going to full practice mode just yet, it's really late. You saw those players in the Rico runs the other day. I was watching those highlights. Would have been fun to see Dominick Harris splashing threes from way downtown. So you got a lot of guys who have made some inroads with each other to make themselves at home at UCLA. And not that it's going to be a tough transition coming from LMU to UCLA, LA life-wise. Still, who's going to get the ball? Does he get the ball in his hands all the time? I'm not sure he's going to need the ball in his hand all the time. He can still score. He's got a very pure stroke, especially in the corner. If given opportunity, if given space, he will knock it down. And if he continues that blistering 45% rate that led one of the better conferences at shooting the three, one of the better conferences in basketball too, especially top-heavy threats like Gonzaga, like St. Mary's. LMU had to go throw in a wrinkle there. Santa Clara, if they could have gotten anything right, maybe could have had an outside chance at a tournament if they can win some games. All right, boom, shakalaka. This is a guy that played some competitive basketball in a sneaky tough conference top to bottom. And he's been there with Gonzaga, and now he comes to UCLA to shoot the three ball. He can play defense. He'll be there, but the ball's going to start in the hands of Dylan Andrews. They're going to be guarded by Kobe Johnson. You've got some much better rim protectors and finishers at the rim with the athletic ability of William Kyle, the versatility of Daly, and just the skill of Tyler Bilodeau is going to be on display next year as the four. Harris, I'm not sure is going to see the ball as much he might have seen at LMU, but all he has to do is keep up the percentage shooting, and he has proven it in his last year. That's why he went to Gonzaga initially out of high school in 2020. As the COVID year, got the medical redshirt year, so he still has another year. Even if he doesn't need to start, if he can stick around another year, might be a starter. As many of these UCLA Bruins could be in this great 1 to 2 year window with what UCLA brings to the table this year and hopefully even next year into 25 and 26. Harris can shoot, he can score. That has been the MO of this year's recruiting class and the class of 24. Kind of the opposite of the class of 23, which saw a lot of international recruits, a lot of youngsters who might need time to develop. This is a guy that's been around the block. He has been in the game of college basketball a long time, and I don't think Mick Cronin needs to push him to play so many minutes when he can build up his stamina, build it up, and find a way to get minutes on the court later in the season if he wants to. Cronin push him into a bigger role, a different role. What he's coming here to do is shoot the basketball and make it, all right? And Cronin says he's made strides as a defensive player, and we'll find out, because if Cronin doesn't like turnovers or defense, you're getting yanked this year. Short hook, you're going to the bench. Don't care if you can score 30 a game. You're going to the bench. Boom. But Harris is a great ad officially, which he committed a very long time ago, so long ago, one of the earlier commits this year, even prior to Trent Perry coming through the transfer portal while Perry was a freshman commit. But here we go. The element to the offense that was missing last year, that elite Dave Singleton-like three-point shooter. That is what the Bruins got in Dominick Harris, and that is the comp. And Singleton had to play a lot with injuries, not so much depth on that team. The Bruins, major depth. That's the role he's going to play on a team that's starting to look a lot more like the team 2 years ago for Mick Cronin, even though every year, every team has its own identity. Okay? Get your hands up, Bruins fans. 8 clap time, baby. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. UCLA. UCLA, fight, fight, fight. This has been Locked On UCLA. Zach signing off. Go Bruins.